29 canceled games, 7 closed game studios, and 1,400 layoffs, all from a single company. Or maybe just a single man. Meet Lars Vigefors, at least I think that's how it's pronounced, CEO/co-founder of Embracer and Friends. In 2018, Lars would be one of GameIndustry.biz's People of the Year, raising profits by over 700% for his company in a single fiscal year.
You make a lot of money.
Yeah, I do all right for myself.
Yet by the end of 2023, the gaming industry viewed him as the Black Death. Where did it all go so wrong? Well, as usual, we're going to have to rev up our Song of Time and head back in time to see what was going on with Embracer before we got to this point. Before Embracer was actually called Embracer, well, Embracer and Friends, they were known as Nordic Games. Nordic Games had already gone bankrupt in 2004.
I declare bankruptcy!
But that was before they were actually a video game developer and publisher, and instead of them going all the way under, Lars and some other investors put money up and basically saved the company, and then they decided, hey, we're going into video game publishing and developing. The company mostly focused on publishing for the first 5 or 6 years before in 2011 they would make their first major acquisition. I couldn't actually find a price for this, but in 2011 they would buy Joe Wood Studios, and this was actually them saving the company. Joe Wood had gone out of business, they'd filed for bankruptcy, couldn't raise any more money, and Embracer came in, Nordic Games came in, and were like, hey, we'll take you and we'll take most of your talent. I couldn't find the price, so this was likely a backroom type of deal. But ultimately, for buying Joe Wood Studios, they got 3 semi-successful IPs. They were at least cult classics. They got the action-adventure RPG Gothic and Gothic 2. They got the RPG/strategy game, it's really hard to nail that one down, called Spellforce. They also got the Painkiller series, which you can kind of think of like Doom type of game, Doom or Wolfenstein. Not really huge IPs, but as I said, each of these did have a cult following on PC. And up until 2013, they would make a few other minor acquisitions, but the big one, again, that they would get in a fire sale is when THQ went out of business. THQ deserves its entirely own video, but long story short, they made this Wii U draw pad, and the Wii U flopped, thus the pad dropped because they made way too many, and THQ just had to go under. When they went under, basically all the IP went for sale, and various ones went to different people, but at the end, all the leftovers went to Embracer for just $4.9 million. Of the IP they acquired, the 3 most notable, in my opinion, would be Destroy All Humans, which is not a massive IP, but I love the friggin' game, Darksiders, which definitely had a cult following, and Titan Quest, another huge PC game. So between Joe Wood and the THQ IP they got, they probably spent under $10 million for all the studios and IP that they had, and that's not a bad price. I mean, as I said, they got both of these when they were bankrupt and fire sales and auctions and all that. This is also the time that Nordic Games would transition to be THQ Nordic instead of Nordic. However, their next move in 2018 would change all of this. Lars and the team had a great idea. If they picked up Koch Media, they'd also acquire Deep Silver, and Deep Silver is big in the publishing and development game. They had Dead Island 2, which was in the cooker for years, but they also had the Metro series and Kingdom Come Deliverance, both of which were really successful for AA games. And during the THQ fire sale, Deep Silver also picked up Red Faction and Saints Row, both well-established IPs, now in the Embracer family. And I know, you're wondering how much. Well, they bought them for 121 million euros in 2018. That translates to roughly 131 million US, by today's conversion rate at least. All we have to do is basically win the lottery, and we can afford some of these video game companies as well. We can call our company Duck Duck Goose, and every time we need to cut someone, we play Duck Duck Goose, and whoever gets Goose is out. But that's not all. They'd also pick up Coffee Stain Studios, the guys who do Goat Simulator, which is more than a cult classic, and Deep Rock Galactic, which is absolutely loved by many PC gamers and some console gamers as well, for 317 million Swedish krona. That's what the Swedish currency is called. Congratulations, you've learned something. Roughly translated, that's 30 million US dollars today. These 2 acquisitions are extremely important to the story because of what happens next. First off, these guys are left to their own devices, like, hey, you're not broke, just keep doing what you're doing and making us money.
All of this just works. It's not, I'm not kidding.
Second off, earnings went through the roof. And this planted a seed. I'm telling you, this is what planted the seed in Lars. Why buy bankrupt studios when you can buy people that are already making games? and make money off of that. THQ Nordic's net sales rose by 713% to nearly $450 million in its 2018 fiscal year. In December of 2018, GamesIndustry.biz named Vigafers one of their People of the Year of 2018. He joined the list with Phil Spencer and Yves Guillemot, which is the CEO of Ubisoft. And no, the irony is not lost on me that he joined the list with another guy who's gutted his gaming staff.
He said that because that sounds a lot better than we're going to gut it with a machete. Okay?
And Yves, who is, yeah, both of those dudes deserve their own video. Like a phoenix from the ashes, Embracer rose up towards the heavens only to get greedy and come plummeting back down.
You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
2019 was a pretty quiet year for Embracer. They did do a few investments into smaller studios, and the most notable of that was Neon Giant. Those are the guys who created The Ascent, which you might have played on Game Pass. Another thing they do in 2019 is change the name from THQ Nordic to the Embracer Group. 2020 is when things really started to get out of hand. Embracer would purchase Saber Interactive, and they'd also get the 5 studios under Saber Interactive, which would cost them $525 million. If you were doing the math, basically 2018, all the money they earned would basically be spent right here. $525 million is the amount of money park visitors spent in the entire state of Washington in a single year. That is an insane amount of money. At this point, Lars and crew realized they needed to get some more money. They would get additional funding and additional investments because, you know, everyone wasn't afraid to get into the video game industry back then. Even if they had just stopped there, I imagine there would have eventually been some layoffs, but they did not. They would acquire another 18 studios in 2020 alone. Now, these weren't all just going to THQ Nordic or Embracer. There was also some going to work under Saber Interactive, and some of them go over to Deep Silver, but still, it was a lot of studios to be picked up. And of the studios, the ones you'd probably recognize is Purple Lamp. Those are the guys who do the SpongeBob games, and they're currently working on the Epic Mickey remaster, remake, whatever they want to call that. Zen Studios, those are the guys who do all the pinball games and the licensing with the pinball games. And Flying Wild Hogs, mostly I want to put them in there so I can use this picture again, but also they do the Shadow Warrior series. Again, another PC mostly game, but it's got a big following. So if we're doing the math, in 2020 alone, they have picked up over 20 studios. Are we starting to see a pattern yet?
Do I really look like a guy with a plan?
Also worth mentioning, they picked up 4A Games. Those are the guys who actually work on the Metro. So it's weird. They had the publishing rights to the Metro series, but they didn't have. It's really silly. Point is, Metro is now completely under the fold of Embracer. If 2020 was their multi-million year, then 2021 was going to be their multi-billion year. And just as a quick reminder, the biggest acquisition in 2020 was Saber for $525 million. In 2021, it was going to be Gearbox Software for $1.3 billion. But wait, there's more. They would also spend another $640 million on Easy Brain. Are we seeing the pattern yet? Also, the Gearbox one was weird because 2K held onto the publishing rights for Borderlands, which means they were earning, it's generally between 10 to 20%. I would assume more on the high end from 2K and Borderlands, which means you're not even getting 100% of the profit from the thing you just bought for $1.3 billion. 2021, they'd actually raise a little bit more money first. They'd raise $890 million basically by giving out more stock. So the biggest acquisition they would make in 2021 is Asmodee, which is a board game publisher, not a video game publisher. Asmodee is apparently one of the only things in Embracer that is continually making money, so this apparently is a good investment. Well, I guess that depends on your perspective, because they bought the company for 2.75 billion euros, which translates to 3.11 billion US. This would of course be split between stock and cash, as well as debt refinancing, which is basically Embracer gets to now act as a co-signer on the loans or anything that Asmodee owns, which means you generally get better terms on your loan. But ultimately, someone still's going to have to pay those loans, and guess who that is? That's right, Embracer. Moving right on into 2022, when things were kind of getting back to normal, not so much for them the investment side though. These guys would then go to Square Enix. Square Enix is another one of those companies that is currently in a bit of a hole, and getting rid of your IP is not the way to climb out of it, so yeah. But don't forget, at this point, the Square Enix president was all about the NFT stuff, so I guess he needed some more money to get his crypto. Anyways, they ended up buying Crystal Dynamics, Eidos Montreal, and Square Enix Montreal, and they would get Tomb Raider, Deus Ex, Thief, and the Lego Legacy of Kain, which you might think is quite a lot of money, right? It's a lot of IP, probably stuff you've even heard of. They bought them for $300 million. Let us remind ourselves that they just bought Gearbox for $1.3 billion, and they don't even earn 100% of the freaking revenue from these games. Legitimately though, like between 2020 and 2022, if they have to pay every single cent, which they did have to pay a lot of it, they spent over $5 billion. Or they're down over $5 billion. They didn't spend it. By the end of 2022, they would still pick one more thing up, and that was securing the license to Middle-earth Enterprises, so they can basically make Lord of the Rings and Hobbit games now, which they did make the Mines to Moria, and they're doing a Halfling Housemaker or whatever, but still, got a long way to go for these games. By the time of their peak in 2022, Embracer had a whopping 111 studios. For reference, Microsoft, likely the closest competitor, has 23 currently. One of these companies has more money than God. The other one is still taking investments that begin with the word mill instead of bill. At least that's what we thought. Sound investment advice says you should never put all of your eggs into one basket. And as a guy who owns chickens, I agree with that. They roll a lot when they're on top of each other, and sometimes they get cracked. But what if the basket was $2 billion? Would you put all your eggs in that basket? Embracer had already received a $1 billion investment from a group called Savvy Games Group. This is a company from Saudi Arabia that invests in game development, publishing, and esports. Honestly, I didn't dig any deeper than that because I was worried I'd find a video in it and then I'd have another video floating in my head, and I already have like 30, so I don't need that right now, but I'll check them out at some point. My point is they have money, and honestly for 2022 things are mostly just chill over at Embracer. They didn't really do many acquisitions. They were just kind of keeping their money and trying to find more investments. Not to say that they didn't have any issues, it's just these are massive companies joining other massive companies. It's an assimilation issue, not so much a Embracer problem. So they had some delays. In May of 2023, Embracer announced that it was going to receive another $2 billion, but the source was never revealed. That partner ended up walking away from the deal, and Embracer didn't receive the funds they needed to keep operating at that level. Their stock price fell 40%. It was later reported by Axios that it was actually the Savvy Games Group that offered the investment and then later decided, no, we don't want this. Less than a month later, Embracer had to start its new restructuring program. And it wasn't just for cost cutting, this was a matter of survival. Earlier I asked if you were seeing a trend, and I think what you might have thought I meant was the fact that they were just spending too much money. It wasn't so much that they were just spending too much money, it was what they were spending the money on. Microsoft bought Bethesda for $7.5 billion, and they've got a ton of IP out of that. They also bought Call of Duty, Activision, for almost $70 billion, but they also got King, which is Candy Crush, and they got Blizzard, which, depending on how you feel about Blizzard, whatever, but they have Diablo, Overwatch, they make money. As I was going over these acquisitions, I kept noticing either A, they're really unknown, or B, you're not getting 100% of the profit. Yes, $1.3 billion for Gearbox is a great studio, but how long is it going to take you to pay that off? Sony buys Bungie for $3.8 billion. They get Destiny, they get Marathon, they get these potential games as a service. See, this is what I was saying. The other companies in this industry will buy you for your IP, not your talent. Their biggest IPs were really Saints Row, Metro, and I guess Tomb Raider. I guess really it's actually Goat Simulator probably, but you don't want Goat Simulator to be your best IP. And also we know what happened with Saints Row. Volition got shut down. The game underperformed. Ultimately, June of 2023 would be when the hammer would fall. Embracer would immediately begin implementing a large-scale restructuring program, which just saying those words makes me ugh. The focus was on cost reduction, which of course meant games being canceled, layoffs, and studio closures. Between June and November of 2023, Embracer had laid off 904 employees, which was roughly 5% of their workforce at the time. It also canceled at least 15 projects, and then in 2024, they had to have their own fire sale. They would sell both Saber Interactive and Gearbox. They bought Saber for $525 million, and they sold them for $274 million. That's nothing compared to Gearbox though. They bought Gearbox for $1.3 billion and they sold them for $460 million. That's over $800 million in losses from that company alone. By the time it was all said and done, Embracer had lost roughly 25% of their total workforce to layoffs and acquisitions from other companies.
Good luck.
Oh, and the guys that got sold off? Yeah, they weren't safe from the layoffs either. Gearbox is already suffering from it. After selling Gearbox, the chopping block was put away and the layoffs were put on hold. In April 2024, Embracer Group announced that it would split into 3 separate companies. Asmodee Group, which will of course focus on tabletops and keep making more tabletop games because they make money. Coffee Stain and Friends, this will basically be AA and indie games as well as some mobile games. These are the guys that do Goat Simulator. And last but not least, Middle-earth Enterprises and Friends, because yeah, these names are all temporary. Well, maybe not Asmodee Group, but the Friends groups, those are temporary names. Middle-earth Enterprises and Friends, just think of them as the rest of Embracer. They do the AAA games, so they're still the big head honchos. And the wildest thing of all of this, Lars is the CEO of all of them. As he put it, he intends to form a new long-term ownership structure. I don't know what that means, but it's certainly words. I don't think this is a good idea. My gut says it's not a great idea, but the ship is already on fire and sinking, so changing captains now is not going to end well either. Also, there is a massive drought when it comes to leadership in the video game industry. Microsoft is suffering from this all over the place. They bought all those studios, but a lot of them don't know what to do. They don't have direction. So again, getting rid of Lars, not so easy. And while they have said that the layoffs are currently on hold, there's no doubt in anyone's mind that more are coming. They do have Kingdom Come Deliverance coming in the second half of 2024. That's not going to be enough to save everyone, but I think it's going to do pretty good. I think it's going to make them happy. Anyways, we'll see where Embracer and Friends are a year from now and see if they've made any changes or if Lars is even there anymore. What about you guys? What do you think? Will Embracer and Friends survive? Should Lars step down? Do you even care? Leave a comment down below and let me know. Later, Gators.